The courtroom is supposed to be a place where justice is served and the rule of law is upheld, but sometimes it becomes the scene of violence, chaos, and death. Some convicts may lash out at judges or victims, while others may be targeted by enemies. In today's video, we will look at 10 convicts who were killed in court. Siale Angelao. Siale Angelao was a 25-year-old member of the Tongan Crip gang who found himself at the center of a shocking courtroom incident. Siale joined the Tongan Crip gang, a violent group that terrorized the Salt Lake City area with crimes such as robbery, assault, and murder after he dropped out of school. Standing at an imposing 6'3" and weighing around 260 pounds, Siale didn't have a hard time assimilating into gang life, and he quickly rose to a high rank in the gang hierarchy. In 2014, authorities arrested and charged many of the gangsters. It turns out that Siale was one of 17 people named in a racketeering indictment. He faced charges that included conspiracy, assault, robbery, weapons offenses, and a series of attacks on local store clerks. But that wasn't all. Siale also faced additional charges for assaulting 2 federal officers and threatening them with a firearm. He was the last defendant in the case to face trial, and things took a dramatic turn. As the trial unfolded, a prison inmate was testifying about the gang's inner workings when Siale felt that he had said enough and made a daring move. He spotted a pen, snatched it from an attorney, and leaped over the witness stand in a shocking attempt to stab the witness testifying against him. A U.S. Marshal acted swiftly and shot Siale multiple times, preventing further harm. Siale was rushed to the hospital, but tragically succumbed to his injuries. This disturbing event led to a mistrial, as it deeply affected the jury. There was debate about whether the use of force was justified, with Siale's family claiming excessive violence. However, an internal investigation cleared the U.S. Marshal of any wrongdoing, ruling that the use of force was reasonable, given the sudden and dangerous nature of Siale's attack. Siale's family argued that racism played a role in the shooting, and believed less lethal options, such as tasers, should have been explored. Despite these claims, the marshal was acquitted. Siale's family also sued the marshal for excessive force, claiming that he violated Siale's civil rights. However, their case was dismissed by a judge, who ruled that the shooting was justified and that the marshal acted reasonably to protect the witness and others. Siale's ill-advised behavior led to his demise, and so did the actions of Klaus Grabowski. Klaus Grabowski's actions had a profound impact on Marianne Bachmeier's life. Marianne Bachmeier was born in 1950. She grew up in Sarstedt, West Germany, in a conservative and religious household with a father who was a heavy drinker. Her parents divorced, and Marianne faced a tumultuous relationship with her stepfather, leading to her being kicked out of her home. She became a mother at a young age, giving up her first 2 children for adoption and experiencing a traumatic incident when she was sexually assaulted. In 1972, Marianne began dating the manager of a pub where they both worked, and she became pregnant again. She gave birth to her 3rd child, Anna, in 1972, and raised her as a single mother. Marianne's lifestyle was far from ideal. She often left young Anna to fend for herself, and even contemplated giving her up for adoption. Tragically, on May 5, 1980, Anna, then 7 years old, had a disagreement with her mother and decided to skip school. She was abducted by Klaus Grabowski, a 35-year-old butcher with a history of sexual offenses. He sexually assaulted and strangled Anna, leaving her lifeless body by a canal. Grabowski's fiancée reported him to the police, leading to his arrest. Marianne's response was shocking. On the morning of March 6, 1981, during the 3rd day of the trial, around 10 a.m., Marianne Bachmeier managed to sneak a Beretta 70 into room 157 of the Lübeck District Court. In a shocking turn of events, she fatally shot Klaus Grabowski. Marianne fired 7 shots at Grabowski's back, with 6 of them finding their mark, leading to his almost instant death. She then surrendered without resistance. Nearly a year later, on November 2, 1982, Marianne was initially charged with murder in court. However, the prosecution later dropped the murder charge. Following 28 days of negotiations, a verdict was reached. 4 months after the trial began, on March 2, 1983, the Circuit Court Chamber of the District Court of Lübeck convicted Bachmeier of manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison but was eventually released after serving 3. Marianne's actions stirred significant public debate and media coverage. On September 17, 1996, at the age of 46, Bachmeier succumbed to pancreatic cancer in a Lübeck hospital. She was eventually buried beside her beloved daughter, Anna, in Bergtor Cemetery, Lübeck. On number 3, we have David Paradiso. David Paradiso's life took a dark turn when he became involved in a saga that was both captivating and filled with violence. It all began with his arrest in December 2006 for a horrifying crime, the murder of his girlfriend, Eileen Pelt. Their relationship had barely lasted a few weeks when David literally slaughtered his girlfriend in the backseat of a car driven by his mother, Deborah Paradiso. Deborah later claimed she hadn't heard the couple argue until that fateful day. However, what followed was even more surprising. Undeterred by the seriousness of his crime, David compelled his mother to drive him from Lloyd, California, to a place 15 miles away in Amador County, where he heartlessly disposed of Eileen's lifeless body along a lonely road. During his trial in 2009, the narrative took an even stranger turn. Before this trial, David's mother, Deborah Paradiso, had been deeply concerned about her son's mental health. She had noticed signs of a potential breakdown, such as sorrow in his eyes and suspicions that he possessed a firearm, which she reported to the authorities. Despite her concerns, no evidence of a weapon was found during a search of David's holding cell, so her worries were dismissed. Deborah later claimed that this dismissal contributed to the catastrophic events that followed. During the trial, David Paradiso provided a different version of events. He abandoned his previous argument that he acted in fear for his life and instead claimed that he took Eileen's life because he believed she deserved to die. This dramatic shift in his story was both confusing and troubling. As the trial momentarily paused due to an outburst from Deborah, David made his move. He attacked Judge Cinda Fox, who was presiding over the trial, with an unidentifiable sharp weapon. He stabbed the judge multiple times and physically assaulted her. Though courtroom visitors attempted to intervene, it was Lewis detective Eric Bradley who finally grabbed his gun and shot David Paradiso. Despite the injuries, Judge Fox was successfully evacuated from the courtroom on a stretcher and recovered. Tragically, David Paradiso succumbed to the gunshot wounds he sustained during the chaotic event. This unexpected turn of events left a trail of destruction in its wake. David's family, especially his mother and brother, believed that the tragedy might have been avoided if officials had handled his deteriorating mental health differently. David's brother, Aaron Paradiso, claimed that David had paranoid schizophrenia and should not have been called to the stand in his fragile mental state. While David chose suicide by cops as the way to go, our next victim had a more grand plan. Michael Marin. Michael James. Marin was a man born into a life that many could only dream of. After attending Brigham Young University and later Yale Law School, Michael began a career that took him from Wall Street to the highest peaks on the planet. During the 1980s and 90s, Michael ventured into complex investments. He worked at renowned financial institutions like Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, and Salomon Brothers, primarily focusing on their Asian operations. With his extravagant lifestyle, including a multi-million-dollar Arizona mansion and an art collection featuring works by Pablo Picasso, Michael appeared to be living the American dream. But he was far from your typical Wall Street figure. A thrill-seeker at heart, he scaled the highest peaks on 6 continents, even conquering the daunting Mount Everest in 2001. However, his life took a dark and unexpected turn when he found himself at the center of a criminal case that would shock everyone who knew him. The allegations were startling. He was accused of deliberately setting his own house on fire and subsequently charged to court. Despite the accusations and mounting evidence, Michael vehemently insisted on his innocence. He attempted to explain away the bizarre use of scuba diving gear in his escape from the burning house. But perhaps the most astonishing twist in his story happened during the court proceedings. Michael faced the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence of 7 to 21 years if convicted. Then came the day that would be forever etched in courtroom history. On June 28, 2012, the jury delivered a guilty verdict. What happened next was nothing short of shocking. In a chilling and dramatic display, Michael appeared overwhelmed by the verdict. But there was more to his reaction than met the eye. Michael closed his eyes, covered his face with his hands, and then ingested a mysterious substance. In mere moments, he collapsed to the floor, convulsing. Michael was rushed to a central hospital in Phoenix, where it was confirmed that he had consumed a lethal dose of cyanide. leading to his untimely death. Another convict with a similar mindset as Michael is Slobodan Praljak. Slobodan Praljak was a Bosnian Croat who had a significant military role during the Croat-Bosniak War from 1992 to 1995. Praljak was a man of various talents. Not only was he a soldier, but he also dabbled in engineering, directed television and theater, and even tried his hand at business. He made headlines when he willingly joined the Croatian armed forces during the Croatian War of Independence in 1991. Praljak held a prominent position in the Croatian military, and he was one of the key figures in the Croatian Defense Council during the Bosnian War. However, his life took a dark turn when he was indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in 2004. The accusations against Praljak were grave, including his alleged failure to prevent crimes committed by the armed forces, such as the removal and detention of the Muslim population, murders, destruction of buildings, and attacks on international organizations. He was also accused of ordering the destruction of Mostar's iconic Stari Most, which inflicted harm on the Muslim civilian population. In 2017, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia delivered its verdict, finding Slobodan Praljak guilty of violating the laws of war, committing crimes against humanity, and breaching the Geneva Conventions. His reaction to this damning sentence was nothing short of a courtroom spectacle. During the pronouncement of his appeal judgment on November 29, 2017, Praljak publicly rejected the verdict. But then, in a shocking and dramatic move, he did something that left everyone in the courtroom in disbelief. Praljak boldly downed a bottle of cyanide in a gesture of defiance and desperation. The images of this act sent shockwaves through the international community. Praljak was quickly transported to a hospital, but his actions proved fatal, and he passed away. It was a dramatic and tragic end to a man whose life had been entangled in the horrors of war and the subsequent legal proceedings. As if Praljak's actions were not bad enough, let me introduce you to Brian Nichols. Brian Nichols. Brain was born on December 10, 1971, in Baltimore, Maryland. Brain led a life of crime. His criminal journey was marked by a troubled past. Prior convictions for theft and violence were clear signs of what was to come. However, it was on March 11, 2005, that his name would become synonymous with violence and chaos. On that fateful day, Brian was in the Fulton County Courthouse for a retrial on charges of rape and other felonies. He had a history of anger issues, but no one could have predicted the horrors that would unfold. Brian's violent spree began when he overpowered a deputy sheriff, seizing her weapon. In a matter of moments, he unleashed a hail of gunfire within the courthouse, leaving a trail of death and destruction. Among his victims were the presiding judge, Roland Barnes, a court reporter, and a deputy. Brian's rampage even went beyond the courthouse, as he also killed a federal agent and a customs agent during his escape. In the wake of the chaos, Atlanta was gripped by fear as Brian led law enforcement on a massive manhunt. His face was plastered across television screens. Brian eventually took a woman hostage and fled to a suburban apartment complex. It was there that the nightmare came to an end. In a surprising turn of events, Brian surrendered peacefully to the authorities, ending a 26-hour standoff. The man who had caused so much destruction and terror was now in custody. Subsequent legal proceedings revealed a troubled mind. Nichols's defense argued that he had a mental illness at the time of his crimes, prompting questions about the intersection of mental health and criminal behavior. Despite this defense, the jury found him guilty of multiple counts of murder and a slew of other charges. In December 2008, Brian Nichols was sentenced to multiple life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. His case left an indelible mark on the American criminal justice system, raising important questions about security in courthouses and the profound impact of mental illness on criminal behavior. However, for Jonathan, there was no defense based on mental illness. Jonathan Schmitz. Jonathan Schmitz, born in 1970, was an ordinary man living in Lake Orion, Michigan. He didn't have the demeanor of a criminal mastermind or a dangerous person. In fact, he was an everyday guy, an electrician by trade, living a quiet life in the suburbs. But sometimes, even the most unassuming individuals can become entangled in extraordinary events. Jonathan Schmitz gained notoriety in the mid-1990s thanks to an appearance on a popular daytime talk show, The Jenny Jones Show. In 1995, Schmitz appeared as a guest on an episode that featured secret admirers, revealing their crushes to the objects of their affection. Little did he know that this seemingly innocent TV appearance would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. During the show, Schmitz was presented with a secret admirer, Scott Amaduri. Schmitz, unaware of Amadur's identity, received a suggestive note from him. What followed was a mix of embarrassment, confusion, and the fear of being publicly humiliated. Schmitz left the show, visibly distressed. 3 days after the taping, on March 9, 1995, a furious and agitated Jonathan Schmitz confronted Scott Amadura at Amadur's mobile home. The encounter took a dark turn, leading Schmitz to take a shotgun and end Amadur's life. It was a shocking and tragic end to an already bizarre situation. Schmitz's trial became a media sensation, raising critical questions about the responsibility of television shows in creating sensational content. The defense argued that the humiliation Schmitz experienced on the show had driven him to commit the murder. Schmitz was charged with first-degree murder and brought to trial. In March 1996, during Schmitz's trial, there was a shocking and tragic moment. He unexpectedly pulled out a revolver in the courtroom and attempted to end his own life. The scene was chaotic, and the fear that swept through the courtroom was difficult to put into words. Spectators, lawyers, and court officials were all left in disbelief as Schmitz pointed the revolver at his head and pulled the trigger. Remarkably, Schmitz survived the self-inflicted gunshot wound. Still, this distressing incident only made an already complicated case even more challenging. He was promptly rushed to the hospital, where he underwent life-saving surgery. Despite this dramatic turn of events, Schmitz was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, far less than the life sentence that a first-degree murder conviction would have carried. The jury concluded that while Schmitz had committed the crime, it wasn't premeditated murder in the first degree. The jury's decision reflected the belief that Schmitz's actions were influenced by a diminished capacity due to the emotional distress caused by the TV show. Although our next convict attempted the same stunt, he wasn't so lucky. Laren Anthony Ball. Laren Anthony Ball, as far as criminals go, was no criminal mastermind, but that didn't make him any less dangerous. Ball found himself in a world of trouble, facing charges of felony murder and 2 counts of armed robbery. On the night of December 27, 2001, Ball shot and killed 27-year-old Eamon Rogers before making off with the man's Rolex. Little did he know that the very watch he stole would eventually lead investigators straight to his doorstep. As he awaited trial in Milwaukee County Jail, Ball had a plan. He wanted to escape, to slip away from the long arm of the law. His first scheme involved switching identification wristbands with a prisoner scheduled for release. It was a clever idea, but things didn't go as planned. With his first escape attempt foiled, Ball was moved into solitary confinement, but he wasn't ready to give up. He started plotting something even more terrifying. However, the police were one step ahead of him. When the day of the trial arrived, Ball was brought into the courtroom with extra security measures in place, wearing a stun belt, handcuffs, and shackles. The jury delivered the verdict, guilty. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Ball lunged across the room, jumped into the jury box, and attempted to throw himself through a window. Unfortunately for him, the window held, and he remained trapped inside. As members of the jury scattered in panic, 2 deputies tackled Ball to the ground, but he wasn't finished. In the struggle, he managed to grab one of the deputy's guns and fired twice, hitting one deputy in the leg. The other brave bailiff grappled with Ball, desperately trying to prevent him from firing again while also holding on to him for dear life. Amid the chaos, Alfonso Morales, the lead detective on the case, was in the courtroom to hear the verdict. He knew he had to act fast to prevent further bloodshed. Without hesitation, he dove under the prosecution table and fired several shots at Ball. In the end, Ball may not have been originally sentenced to death, but his courtroom shenanigans certainly sealed that fate for him. But Ball wasn't the only one to lose his life in the courtroom. There is the case of Gerald Curry. Gerald Curry. Unlike most of the others on this list, Gerald wasn't a convict. On the contrary, he was a lawyer who was hired by William Stryer, a 66-year-old who had a trust fund. He hired Gerald Curry to manage his $98,000 trust fund that he had received following a car accident. But William was unhappy with the results. He thought that Curry had cheated him and ruined his life. He wanted revenge. In 2003, a shocking incident outside a courthouse. William opened fire on Gerald Curry, who had a hearing in the court that day. The disturbing turn of events was captured on film by a TV cameraman. The footage showed William, armed with 2 weapons, firing multiple shots at Curry, who desperately sought cover behind a tree. It was a life-and-death struggle, with Curry's survival hanging in the balance. After the incident, William calmly walked away from the scene. He pocketed his firearms and was heard saying, "That's what you get for taking my money," as he left the courtroom. Fortunately, Curry survived, and William was eventually arrested and charged to court. During the trial, the defense argued a different perspective, contending that William believed his trust had been badly mismanaged, and he felt wronged. They claimed he had lost his sanity during the incident, driven by a strong sense of injustice rather than malice. They argued that Stryer had lost his grip on reality during the incident, asserting that his actions were fueled by a strong sense of injustice rather than malice. Gerald Curry, the lawyer who bore the brunt of Stryer's wrath, expressed relief at Stryer's life sentence, viewing him as a dangerous individual who needed to be kept behind bars. Stryer was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison, plus 25 years. While Stryer got to serve a prison sentence, Jason Biekiewicz wasn't that lucky. Jason Biekiewicz is a man who not only hates the Thanksgiving holidays, but sees no reason for others to celebrate the holiday. On Thanksgiving in 2015, when most people were coming together with family and friends to celebrate, Biekiewicz had other plans. Drunk and unpredictable, Biekiewicz stumbled into a new house in Ohio and opened fire on the homeowner, striking him in the head and chest. Miraculously, the homeowner survived this brutal attack, and Biekiewicz was later arrested. Biekiewicz was charged with 2 counts of felony assault and 1 count of attempted murder. When Biekiewicz faced the consequences of his actions, he was given a chance to accept a 5-year plea deal. However, he stubbornly turned it down and chose to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. In a bizarre twist, he claimed that he had been at the house to buy drugs and had fired in self-defense, but the jury saw through these conflicting stories, and his guilt was undeniable. With an extensive criminal history, the judge didn't take his actions lightly. Biekiewicz was sentenced to 13 years in prison. However, Biekiewicz was not done. As he was being escorted out of the courtroom by a deputy, Biekiewicz made a daring escape attempt. His ankles had swollen to the point where they couldn't be shackled, which played a crucial role in his audacious plan. In a desperate bid for freedom, he managed to break free from the deputy's grasp. The officers ran after him, but Biekiewicz flung himself over the building's 3rd-floor window. The courtroom erupted in chaos as screams filled the air. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but it was too late. A 100-foot fall is not something anyone can easily survive. For Jason Biekiewicz, there would be no jail terms and no consequences for his actions. But Jason Biekiewicz was not the only person to do something disturbing in court. There is Aubrey Trail. Trail's story began with Sydney Loof, a young store clerk who disappeared in November 2017 after a Tinder date. She never returned, and her family and friends frantically searched for her. Tragically, their worst fears were confirmed when Loof's dismembered remains were discovered a month later in trash bags in a rural area. But the horror didn't end there. Aubrey Trail and his then-girlfriend Bailey Boswell were accused of luring Loof into their deadly trap using social media. Trail and Boswell were considered persons of interest from the beginning of the investigation. They were eventually arrested in Branson, Missouri, in November 2017. Both initially denied involvement in Loof's death. Aubrey Trail had a history of criminal activity and was known for various scams and frauds. He frequently used aliases and had a reputation for being manipulative. During the trial, emotions ran high in the courtroom. The prosecution painted a chilling picture of Trail and Boswell's evil intentions, holding them responsible for Loof's gruesome death. They claimed it was no accident, and that it was a meticulously executed crime. But Trail claimed that Loof's death was an accident during a sexual encounter and not deliberate. The prosecution disagreed. They argued that Trail and his girlfriend had methodically planned this horrifying act for weeks. However, the trial took a dramatic turn after a witness had just finished testifying. Trail, unable to contain his feelings any longer, erupted in a shocking outburst. His outburst was an attempt to exonerate his girlfriend, Boswell, who was also facing first-degree murder charges in connection with Loof's death. He shouted, "Bailey is innocent, and I curse you all," and then slashed his neck with an unknown sharp object. What followed was truly astonishing. Trail collapsed from his wheelchair, and the courtroom was thrown into disarray. It was a scene of chaos and confusion, with bailiffs rushing to restrain him, save him, and ensure the safety of all present. Fortunately, Trail's injuries were not as severe as one might expect after such a dramatic incident. He was swiftly rushed to the hospital but made a surprisingly rapid recovery, reappearing in court in less than 3 weeks. His attorneys suggested that he had harmed himself with a piece of a razor blade, though they assured the court that his injuries were not life-threatening. The judge, in response to the incident, ordered that Trail must appear in handcuffs for the remainder of the trial. In July 2019, Trail was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper disposal of human remains. He was sentenced to the death penalty. Bailey Boswell was also charged in connection with Loof's murder and faced a separate trial. Although Trail survived his attempt, not every convict is that lucky. Like the case of Jeffrey Saul Ferris. Jeffrey Saul Ferris was a defendant on trial in Fargo, North Dakota, who took a drastic and horrifying step after hearing the guilty verdict delivered by the jury. The courtroom drama unfolded in the Quentin N. Burdick U.S. Courthouse and shocked everyone. The trial centered around Ferris, a 55-year-old man accused of nearly running over 7 children and threatening one child with a gun on the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians Reservation in North Dakota. While he was not a tribal member, he lived in the reservation's main settlement, Belcourt, and had ancestral ties to tribal members. Ferris was facing a possible life sentence if found guilty. As the jury delivered its verdict, tension filled the courtroom. After hearing the guilty verdict on some counts, Ferris's attorney noticed his client acting strangely, tugging at his collar. Moments later, chaos erupted as blood began to gush from Ferris's neck. It became apparent that he had slashed his neck with a sharp object, possibly an envelope opener. Law enforcement and marshals immediately intervened, but the situation quickly escalated. Ferris could be heard screaming, "I can't breathe," as the authorities tried to control the situation. Despite their efforts, it was too late, and Ferris tragically passed away in the courtroom. This shocking incident left everyone bewildered. The FBI launched an investigation to determine how Ferris managed to smuggle in a weapon, believed to be a sharp object, possibly made of plastic or a letter opener, past courtroom security. The incident was described as very unusual and prompted questions about courtroom security and procedures. Just like Jeffrey Ferris, another Jeffrey carried out another gruesome stunt in court. This is Jeffrey Scott Jones. Jeffrey Scott Jones. In a shocking courtroom scene in Santa Ana, California, Jeffrey Scott Jones, an English teacher from Huntington Beach, reacted dramatically to his conviction for sexually assaulting a teenage relative of his live-in girlfriend in 2012 and 2013. The jury's verdict found him guilty of aggravated sexual assault of a child and continuous sexual abuse, and he faced a potential sentence of up to 66 years to life in prison. The tense courtroom atmosphere took a horrific turn when Jones, who had been out on bail during the trial, reached into his left pocket and used a razor to slash his throat. The senior deputy district attorney Heather Brown described the gruesome scene, noting that his head hit the table as blood spilled, causing immediate panic in the courtroom. Despite being seated next to Jones, even his defense attorney, Ed Wellborn, initially didn't notice the act, which happened suddenly. The incident was so unexpected and shocking that many believed Jones had merely fainted. His attorney later revealed that Jones had cut an artery in his neck, causing severe bleeding. The defense had argued that the victim, a teenage relative of Jones's live-in girlfriend, had fabricated the story of sexual assault to conceal her marijuana use. They contended that there was reasonable doubt about the alleged abuse. However, the jury's verdict did not agree with the defense's arguments, leading to Jones's conviction. The dramatic incident prompted immediate action and an investigation into how Jones managed to bring a razor blade into the courtroom. The judge had previously warned Jones that if he were found guilty, he would be taken into custody immediately, and this may have been a contributing factor to his desperate act. While Jones survived the self-inflicted injuries, the courtroom ordeal left everyone involved deeply shaken. Jones was eventually sentenced to 46 years to life imprisonment and required to register as a sex offender. While some may see these killings as a form of poetic justice, others may argue that they undermine the rule of law and the due process of the courts. Regardless of one's perspective, These cases are tragic reminders of the fragility of life and the unpredictability of human behavior. If you found this video intriguing, click the link on your screen to explore other amazing videos.